Nintendo's Switch 2 Direct was everything. I honestly went in with high expectations, but to have them met was an awesome surprise. There's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to from it. I'll talk more about those in the coming weeks as we gear up for the launch. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that some way, somehow, the thing that still managed to get me most excited in the entire presentation was Pokemon. No, I'm not talking about Colosseum and Gale of Darkness coming with the GameCube Virtual Console, though that is a very close second. No, what got me most excited, and I may or may not be a little embarrassed by it, is that Pokemon Legends EA is getting a Switch 2 edition. Now, I loved Pokemon Legends Arceus to death. It became my new favorite Pokemon game since Heart Gold and Soul Silver, so obviously within that time frame I had a gaping hole in my life that needed to be filled, and Arceus filled that. Okay, I should probably choose my words better than that. But all this is to say, because of my adoration towards Legends Arceus, I had high hopes for Legends EA. Now, have the trailers for ZA been living up to those hopes? Well, that's a complicated question. It's simply a very different game to Arceus, and after getting over the changes and deciphering better what makes a Legends game, I've grown very excited. There was just one thing missing, even still though. Some sort of pop, something to make the game special, some visual flair maybe. I don't think the graphics for ZA were looking bad from the trailers we had gotten so far. I actually thought they were a great baseline for graphics in a Pokemon game moving forward, but even still, before knowing anything about the game, my expectations for ZA were for it to be a Switch 2 title. So there's no denying I felt a bit let down by the initial info on the game, only confirming it to be for Switch 1. Even if I did notice Game Freak fixed a few development hiccups so the game could look and run better than Scarlet and Violet. I knew a Switch 2 version was still possible because of leaks from a few months ago that showed a Switch 2 version was at least being considered by Game Freak, but now that we finally have confirmation of such a version, I kinda lost my when I saw it. Now, is it much better than the Switch 1 version? What in the world has been improved, and will it make a meaningful difference for people who were still on the fence about Pokemon graphics? Well, today I'm going to cover all those details of what's improved and even dispel a few misconceptions while I'm at it. You want to be impressed? Then look no further than the first shot of the Pokemon Legends EA Switch 2 Edition's trailer. Woo, buddy, that was a mouthful. A lot has been added here, and if you look at this compared to any shot of Prism Tower we've seen from the Switch 1 version, then you see that there is indeed a very big difference. But what are all the aspects making this shot more impactful? Well, for one, this scene showcases a new volumetric lighting system that's exclusive to the Switch 2 edition. Don't let the big words scare you, I'll explain it all. Volumetric lighting is essentially an expensive computational system that can very accurately simulate how light interacts with objects. In previous footage, there was a lot of fake lighting, using transparent materials and custom meshes. You don't need to know the terms, just know that it was all fake, to pretend that light was hitting objects or even emanating from them. Now, that's not inherently bad, it just doesn't look quite as good as the real thing. 'Cause now look at the Switch 2 version. Here, we see what the difference looks like in real time when actual volumetric lighting is used. To further this enhanced effect, Game Freak also seems to have added ambient occlusion to the Switch 2 edition. This allows the light that's hitting these objects to not only, look natural as it does, but it also casts shadows and even reflects the light back out. Notice how Prism Tower in some spots of the mountains shimmer while other portions are shadowed from where the light is hitting it from the opposite side. This gives the entire scene a sense of depth and contrast. Normally, this sort of thing is subtle, but when you compare it to the Switch 1 version, it's not subtle at all. Speaking of depth, another visual technique is being used on the Switch 2 version of Pokemon Legends EA, volumetric fog. There's that volumetric word again, I'll explain. In the Switch 1 version, we talked about how Game Freak chose to use distance fog in ZA to fake a depth of field effect in the city, so the game could run properly on Switch 1 while having that fake depth of field. We didn't want a repeat of Scarlet and Violet. But here, we see that the Switch 2 edition doesn't care about those limitations within the scale of ZA. Volumetric fog is used in place of distance fog in this shot to give us a more realistic depth of field effect and clearer visuals with that depth too. The increased rendering distance also shines through here, as all the buildings in Lumiose look pretty crisp in detail even so far away. The assets are of a higher quality rather than needing to be replaced with simpler models at this distance, and no distance fog is covering them up or blurring them unnecessarily. All in all, this first scene of Lumiose is an amazing reference for how much better the game can look on Switch 2. However, what about the other scenes we see in the trailer? Well, that's the thing. When we look at these scenes that came after, it's clear that the only improvements in the Switch 2 version really are just the added effects and graphical systems. Yes, we witness more occlusion, with shadows being cast more naturally and they look more crisp. Yes, we see that the lighting hits the city in more believable ways. And yes, the buildings in the back are looking crisper and higher poly from a farther distance than we saw in the Switch 1 version. But other than those rendered at a distance, all of the actual assets and even the textures close up remain the same. They might look a little bit better on the Switch 2 version simply because of the increased pixel count from the higher resolution. They might even be easier for you to look at and admire or not admire, thanks to the increase to what looks like a minimum of 60 frames a second. There's not as much motion blur going on because of that. But that's about all. Base assets are the same polygon count as Switch 1. Texture packs also seem to be the exact same. Grass and bushes still use 2D assets. It's not the worst thing in the world or anything, but I do want to make sure we all realize that these things are simply not being improved upon in the Switch 2 version, and very likely will not be before release. Regardless, one thing is for sure, Legends EA does look better on Switch 2. Heck, I'm even happy to have seen that even the Switch 1 version got a glow up from its first trailer to its second. It's something I noticed on the website's photos. I noticed that they looked better than the first trailer that we got and wondered why those shots on the website looked so much better. But, aside from some polished up textures, there's this nice halo effect that they gave the characters, Pokemon, and even some assets. Like, important things on screen have this white border to them that looks really good, and it helps them pop a bit more separate from the scenery in the background. It differentiates the important things on screen from those background elements, and it's also just a pleasing effect in general. Like, we want to be sure we see every Pokemon as it comes and that they don't just blur together with the background, I didn't get to talk about this graphical improvement that Pokemon did between the first trailer and the second and so on before the Switch 2 footage was shown, so I'm giving this an honorable mention here in case some of you are still looking to just buy the Switch 1 version. They really are doing a lot to make sure that the visuals still look decent, while also making sure that the game will run better than Scarlet and Violet. But what do you all think about ZA's graphics so far, particularly the ones on Switch 2? Let us know down in the comments so we can all fight about it. Just kidding, please don't fight. Afterwards, check out more of my videos like this one here where I discuss the implications of Pokemon Legends EA being on Switch 2 and why it deserves it and what this means for the future of Pokemon. The link is right in front of you and in the pinned comment. If you'd like to support me and have your name featured at the end of all of my videos, then join my Patreon with the link in front of you or in the description, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. I've been johtojonny, and I'll catch you all there.